Hi, I'm your instructor, Heather Klein, and this is going to be a basic intro to overview specifically Unit 1, the photography unit, and hopefully clarify some of the things that you're supposed to be doing for that unit. So the photography unit, as I said in the first webinar, is a little longer than some of the other units, but it starts the same way. It starts with this photography introduction that tells you what you're supposed to be doing throughout the unit. And then there's this short written assignment. And for Unit 1, the written assignment deals with something called Gestalt principles. And you've got this little chart here, but that's not your main source for this project. You want to go and read the article. I point that out because sometimes people just kind of glance at it and then they don't really look at the article. Why do I want you to look at this for a photography unit? This is a very traditional way of thinking about structuring artwork or analyzing artwork. And as you're taking this course, I'm hoping that, often when we make art, we just kind of make it. It's nice to be able to stop and look at your work and really think about why you're doing what you're doing. And this system called Gestalt Principles is just a way of starting to look at how different things are used in art to make pictures more appealing, more attractive, or effective. So that's a pretty straightforward project in that you just have to find an artwork. There's even a link here to the National Gallery of Canada if you want to go through here and find something that you're attracted to and that you think you can apply the Gestalt principles to. So does that make good sense? Yeah, and again, just, a short paragraph. You also want to make sure that you cite your source, which means you want to list the author, or sort of the artist, the title of the work, and the URL or the website where you got the image from. So just keep that in mind with all the written assignments. Okay. Then the next thing in this unit is this list of key concepts. And you really want to remember that this is here because, especially in assignment 1, you're asked to actually refer to the key concept that you explored in each photograph. And it doesn't have to be earth-shattering. So one kind of key concept could be lighting. So are you trying to use natural light? Or are you seeing how incandescent or fluorescent light can totally set a different kind of tone for a scene than flooding sunlight from a window? So that could be one key concept to explore. For this particular assignment 1, I find viewpoint and framing to be quite important because it seems to be a really successful way of animating objects. So the key concepts are things that you could mention in relation to your first 3 photographs that are assignment 1. The other thing you can use is some of these composition tips. So for example, framing is a good one for photography. Using background objects to set up a frame can be attractive to the eye. So these are some of the approaches you could use for assignment 1. Let's look at assignment 1. Close. Oh, I'm going to my table of contents and I'm hitting assignment 1. This assignment, I hope, is fun. It's trying to take objects and make them alive. I mentioned during the first webinar that this little video is really super helpful because it shows you actual projects that students have done before. I think there's 2 smart ways of getting your head around this assignment. One is to think of like a scene or a story that you want to animate. Because that's basically what you're doing. You're doing a still shot animation. So you can see that these people have used the really happy idea of a murder scene. So that's one way to sort of start to structure how you might set up a scene, what background you might choose, what lighting you might choose. So would the lighting for a murder scene be different for the lighting for, like look at the tension that you get from this raking light with the peanuts. The other way into this assignment would be to pick your object and then think of the scene that goes with it. These peanuts work really good And so do these two different bottles, because they have a sense of personality, especially the peanuts, because they're all different shapes, just like people are. So those are kind of the two ways that I think are, so again, here's a scenario. So they thought of a poker game. They thought it'd be funny if it was fruit. The other thing I'll point out is how you set things in the frame and the viewpoint you take can really make the difference in whether or not these appear to be people. So the first thing you'll notice is the scale in almost all of these more successful, I thought, assignments is fairly close up. So when you have an object sitting in the middle of a table and it's very far away, it's just going to look like a cup. But if it takes front and center and is the feature of the photograph, suddenly it can have the presence of a character. So I suggest that you think a lot about framing, which is how tight you go in, whether you crop somebody off. You know, if somebody's cropped off, that can be a lot more dramatic than if you just got kind of a straight on headshot. And so for the 3 photographs that you're going to create, you can use the same objects and set up different slightly scenarios with them and use different key concepts. So for example, one could have bright lighting, one could have soft lighting like candlelight. One could be an extreme close-up, one could be over the shoulder of a different object. So it's kind of up to you whether you want to use the same objects and set them up 3 different ways and explore different key concepts, or if you want to use a different setup for each photograph. So does that make good sense?
Yeah.
Yeah. And like I said, have fun. Often the most successful ones I've seen have been not sophisticated setups. Like you don't have to build a little stage set or anything. Just find a good background that you think suits the emotional or storyline that you're trying to create. And then again, when you post those 3 images on the blog, you're going to mention the key concepts that you had in mind while you were creating each photo. So is that pretty straightforward?
Yeah, I'm excited for this.
I really think this is a fun assignment. And I also really like this next assignment, but it seems to cause people a little bit more trouble. And I had a webinar at noon today, and I was talking to the participants about it, and I thought, I think I'm making it sound even more confusing. So I went back in and I added a couple of things to this assignment today. The basic idea of this assignment is there's a research component where you're going to look at photographs by famous photographers who specialized in portraiture. And that's why you actually had this list of these 5 different really important portrait photographers that I want you to specifically look at. So do that research element of the project. These links will take you directly to their work. And then you can click on it and kind of go through and find a photograph that really strikes you or you really find engaging or you really like for some reason. It's up to you why you choose it. It could be because of the content. It could be because of the emotional quality of it. It could be because of the person. I don't really care. But what you have to do next is analyze it. So you want to look at it and figure out what it is that's happening in the photograph. And I've even got kind of a little list here of how you can think about analyzing it. So how's light being used? Is the subject dominant in the setting, or are they just a small part of a bigger setting? What's the setting telling you? Is it telling you that the person is from a specific time period or involved in a certain kind of sport or activity? So sort of start by analyzing the picture that you've chosen by this famous photographer, and then you're going to make a portrait in response to it. You don't want to replicate the original photograph. So you don't want to pick the photo that has the lady in the hat waving to the crowd, and then your photo is somebody in a hat waving to a crowd. What you want to do is take the things that you've analyzed about the photo and apply them to your own photograph. So I'll give you an example. Let's just go to one of these photographers. How about Annie Leibovitz? Because she's pretty. She's a very famous celebrity photographer. I don't know if you've heard of her before. But okay, so here we got Bette Midler. I mean, what a photograph, hey? Like, this is wild. But it's kind of about her being this goddess, this kind of iconic diva musician figure. So how could I take that and make my own photograph? Well, I could pick my person who I wanted to take the photograph of and think about what they do. What's their passion? What do they really care about? And then I could find maybe an abstract way of expressing that. So maybe their passion isn't music, maybe it's sport. So maybe they would be featured in an equipment room with all their equipment drying around them if they're a hockey player, or, so does this make sense what I'm sort of suggesting to you?
Yeah.
Excellent. Okay, I even put a couple of samples here. Unfortunately, when you click on the sample, it takes you to the whole art gallery of samples. So you have to just look for assignment 2 sample. And the reason I put these in here is because not only do they have how the assignment, how the portrait that the person took, but it also has how they described their analysis of the original photo, and then how they described how it impacted their own photo.
Mm.
So that's what you're looking to do in this assignment. You're looking to find a photo by one of these 5 famous people that appeals to you, or you're excited by what they captured and the drama of it, or the emotion of it, or the quietness of it. It's really up to you. And then create your own photograph in response. The other element that's in this is whoever you pick to photograph has to sign a release form. Why did I do that? I wanted you to kind of be aware that in contemporary art making, more and more artists have to have an agreement with their subject, which most of the early photographers who are featured in this assignment, some of them were formally commissioned to do work, but some of them, like Everett Baker and Dorothea Lange, took a lot of candid kind of documentary shots. But these days, you often have to have a release form. So when you click on this blue link, it takes you to the release form. You're going to get your subject to fill out. If you can, if you're digitally savvy and you could do a digital document where you just put the names into this document, that's fine. Or you can print it off, fill it out, take a photo, and either mail it to me or attach it to the assignment. And that's going to increase your mark if you include that release form. So at the end of assignment 2, it kind of sums up everything that you should have done in the unit. It tells you that you should have your 3 photos of, of your It's Alive assignment. You post the photo that inspired you for the second assignment and your photo portrait, attach or send the release form. You're going to have done that short written assignment, and you're going to have participated in discussion forum 2. Something that's smart to check at some point in each unit is how this impacts your final portfolio. So again, there's a link to your final portfolio at the end of the assignment. And note that you will have to print a copy of your photo portrait. The others you don't have to. You're just going to include what you put into the blog. You're just going to include in your digital portfolio. But you are going to print out your photo portrait. Why do I bring your attention to this? Because you want to make sure that you save it in a large enough file size that it'll print nicely. Depending on where you're based, I actually can't believe how cheap it is to get a small print done at London Drugs or Walmart. You're not being marked on your photographic printing technique. I just want to check and make sure that your photo was the correct size to print, and also be able to really see the photograph in that printed copy. Okay, so that kind of covers off what I wanted to tell you about the unit.
What size would you recommend the photograph be taken in?
Okay, so what I would do is take it the maximum size. If you're using your phone camera, just set it for the largest size you can.
Mm-hmm.
If you are using a better quality camera, like try to set it to, again, the highest setting that you can. Just so that you have that big file size that you can always save at a smaller size. It's always tricky because there's the amount of pixels that you have in total, which differs depending on the size that you've chosen for the format of your photo. So in other words, you can have a like what I'm trying to say is you can have a 5x7 and save it in a 1 MB file size and it's going to print really well. But if it was 5 feet by 7 feet and it was 1 MB, it wouldn't print very well. So a good rule of thumb is to think about saving it as if it was about an 8x10 image and 4 to 5 megabytes total file size. Does that help? Does that make sense?
Yeah.
I know it's sort of one of those weird things because it also depends how you open the image on your computer. So some people have kind of more sophisticated photo software on their computers than others. But go big and then make a copy in a smaller size to load to the blog is always my advice. So if you don't have any other questions, that's our kind of introduction to Unit 1.